General Manager's Report, agenda item GMR 19/010, which I am moving from the chair with a change, which councillors you have in front of you, and I'm looking for a seconder.
Second that.
Seconded by Councillor Pollock.
Go over here all day on this one.
We'll leave that up there, but I believe that there was going to be a move to go into Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be so moving. And I would also like to foreshadow that I will be putting forward several amendments to the motion as it now stands, including the parts which have been changed.
Certainly, and we will give you the opportunity during Committee of the Whole to speak to each of those individually.
Thank you very much.
Can I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Brown to go into Committee of the Whole. All those in favour? Carried.
Madam Mayor, is that a change from the agenda?
If you keep watching, it may well come to light. So, councillors, you are now open for discussion.
Madam Mayor, just in response to the comment there.
You don't need to respond to the comment, councillor, but you may wish to.
I am just saying it needs to be a bit clearer. So I'm just wondering whether, as a courtesy, either we print these out.
If you gave me more than 1 second, I would be happy to read it out to you.
Well, you asked whether.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Brown. I know, and I understand you're just trying to help. I'm more than happy to read it out, and I'm more than happy for councillors to debate it and to talk about it, and that is why we're in Committee of the Whole, as much as you would like to.
Madam Mayor.
Councillor Nathan, perhaps I could read it out?
No, just a little clarification, if you don't
Certainly.
mind.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether all our community in the gallery understand what it means when we go into Committee of the Whole. Would you mind elucidating on that, please?
Certainly. It means that we suspend the normal Code of Meeting practice and the standing orders, and that we go into an open debate forum where councillors may debate either for or against, or bring up matters to discuss with their fellow councillors as many times as they see fit. So, I have put forward a change, councillors, and I did bring this up with you some time ago. And I've put forward, listening to concerns from some members of our community and also from conversations with my fellow councillors, something that I would like you to consider. And that is that we look at having a public access session. And I will go through each of the parts of that, and 3.27 is that Council will hold a public access session once per month prior to the commencement of briefing sessions for members of the public to raise any council-related issues with councillors that have not been previously determined by council. 3.28 dates for the public access sessions will be determined by resolution of council along with council's annual meeting schedule. 3.29 endorsed dates will be published on council's website. 3.30 public access sessions will commence at 9:15 a.m. unless there are no registered speakers. 3.31 to speak at public access, a person must first make an application to council in the approved form. Applications to speak at the public forum must be received by council. Executive support 0244 741 358 or or council.meetings@escnewsouthwales.gov.au no later than 12 noon of the business day prior to the public access session, and must identify the issue they wish to raise with councillors. 3.32, approved speakers at the public access are to provide a written copy of their address to the council by 12 noon the business day prior to the session via email to council.meetings@esc.newsouthwales.gov.au or hard copy at council's main office in Maria or Bateman's Bay or Narooma libraries. 3.33, 1 hour will be allocated to public access. 3.34, if there are more speakers registered than time permits, council could resolve to extend the public access session for a 15 minutes only. Leftover public speakers will be scheduled first on the list for the next available public access session. 3.35, clauses 3.2, 3.7, 3.10, 3.12, 3.14, 3.15, 3.16, 3.17, 3.18, 3.19, 3.20, 3.21, 3.22, 3.24 and 3.25 and 3.26 apply to public access sessions. Part 3 is the dates for the public access sessions for 2019B, the 23rd of July 2019, the 20th of August 2019, the 17th of September 2019, the 29th of October 2019, the 19th of November 2019 and the 3rd of December 2019. Councillors, with those clauses, I believe that you had a list supplied to you printed out prior to the council meeting, so hopefully you have received those. Councillors, in putting forward this proposal to you, it is my hope that we will see members of our public be able to come and engage with us on any given topics that, and it will allow us, although we will still operate under the Code of Meeting Practice, probably a more relaxed atmosphere, and allow us possibly more time to ask further questions and to hopefully come up with solutions and answers to some of the questions or issues that members of the community may have. So, councillors, I'll throw it open to you for any discussion. Councillor Nathan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When you read out your additional changes, it became a little bit confusing to me in 3.31. On the first line you say to speak at a public access, and then at the beginning of line 3 it's the words are public forum. Could you explain what the differences are?
It's a typo, and thank you for picking that up. It should read public access, not forum.
Thank you. And then as part of that, because of my confusion in that instance, could you elucidate as to what is going to happen with public forum in the light of this public access session?
Well, that will come up for debate, and you're welcome to debate it and discuss it in open meeting now, Committee of the Whole. I think what you're looking for, Councillor, the answer is that public forum, as it is proposed, will remain of the morning of the council meeting. So they are two different items. One is public access, one is public forum.
So the proposed changes then, in terms of public access, is a much greater time span?
I think it's an hour. I think we currently have half an hour, once a fortnight. So it probably doesn't equate necessarily per month to more time, because it's an hour once a month. That's what the proposal is. or half an hour fortnightly as currently exists. Councillor McGinley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I foreshadowed, I have several amendments. I propose to put them forward one by one and open each of them up for debate among my fellow councillors. And if the proposed amendment is carried, I will then continue on with another half a dozen or so. So that's the process I intend to follow.
Councillor, no, sorry, in Committee of the Whole you cannot put and debate and vote on.
Okay.
We can discuss each of your amendments, and then once we go out of Committee of the Whole, we will put each of those individual amendments, and you can have further discussion or debate if you choose, or your fellow councillors choose to, and then your amendments will be put and voted on. So we're clear on the process.
Good, thank you. Thanks for that clarification.
Okay, so if you would like to start off with the first of your amendments that you would wish to discuss with your fellow councillors.
Okay. First one is that Clause 3.3 of the draft Code of Meeting Practice be amended so that it would now read, to speak at public forum, a person must first make an application to Council which must be received by Council, executive support, phone number and email address, no later than 12 noon of the business day prior to the meeting, and must identify the item of business on the agenda of Council meeting the person wishes to speak to. Applicants may, if they choose to do so, but are not obliged to, attach or forward or deliver a draft of their proposed presentation when registering. Alternatively, applicants may provide a copy to Council on the day of presentation if they wish to ensure that it is recorded on Council's website. If the above is adopted, it is further proposed that the draft Code of Meeting Practice be amended as follows. Clause 3.4 be deleted, Clause 3.26 be deleted, and Section 3 be renumbered to reflect the deleted clauses. Now, to just explain what I'm on about there, is basically in the current draft, it's been quite clear that people are now being expected to provide a written presentation 24 hours before they come to public forum. And I'll note in the new clause, the same would apply to the proposed public access. So my changes to the public forum elements would flow through to any public access discussion as well. Essentially what I'm arguing against is that we should not require people to provide a written presentation prior to them coming in. Something that hasn't been mentioned by anyone to date, and I think it's worth considering when we talk about this, is that not everyone has the capacity to write well. Some people are in fact semi or functionally illiterate as adults. I know several. They're as intelligent as you or I. They simply don't have the capacity to write. They find it embarrassing, and they live very fruitful lives and keep it a big secret from lots of people most of the time. And to demand that someone has to be able to write a presentation, I think is limiting on those elements of our society. But notwithstanding that, I also think it's an imposition to put one more barrier in front of making it easy for people to come and talk to us. And that will be a theme that I refer to throughout these amendments. Collectively, I see a lot of these proposals as a group make it just that bit more difficult and just that bit more discouraging for people to come forward and put their views. And this is just one example. So that's my first suggested amendment.
So perhaps we'll have some conversation. I have a question for you, Councillor McGinley, just in light of what you're suggesting. If the verbal presentation, either in public access or public forum, is a extension of the public consultation that we undergo on any given subject, so typically any item that comes to this chamber for debate has previously been out for public consult, so we've had meetings with interest groups, with various members of our community. There's been a submission process prior to that, and then the final opportunity through that process would be that members come and be able to speak to us directly, either at public access or public forum. I cannot imagine that you're suggesting that those who take time to write submissions in should be considered in less of a way, or perhaps even in more of a way, than somebody who comes and does a verbal presentation. And if you look at the way that we do the public submission process, we have to have a cut-off date, even though this council, from my experience, has been very generous in accepting submissions that come in after the close-off dates as a general rule. So my logic is saying that I think that if we are expecting people that take the time to write at times considerable submissions, that we have an expectation that they provide that in a written form at a specific cut-off date. I believe that the public forum and public access sessions are an extension of that community engagement, and I don't believe that it is an onerous requirement that they need to provide us with a written presentation of what they intend to present to council.
Thank you. I understand the 2 points you're making there. I would challenge both of them. Lots of items that appear on our agenda are first-time things. Not everything that we talk about has gone out for public submission. There will be lots of issues that the first people realise we're going to be talking about it is when, if they are keen and they check out the council website on the Wednesday after our briefing sessions, and they suddenly see, oh, there's an agenda item, I'm interested. They have the choice of writing submissions. What I'm suggesting is they should also have the choice of not writing a submission, but come in and verbally address that. It's not one supplements the other. There are different methods that suit different kinds of people, and it gives them more opportunities. I'm all in favour of as many mechanisms and opportunities for people of different capacities, different styles of communication, to be able to communicate with us. One does not preclude the other. One is not more important than the other. They choose their method of communication as best suits them, their time, their commitments, and their capacity to communicate. So I don't see a problem.
Councillor Main.
Oh, thanks, Madam Mayor. Just if I can make a brief comment, I find I have a number of people who talk to me on a Sunday or a Monday morning of a council meeting, such as today, and say, I wasn't aware of this issue, or I've heard this is coming up. When do I need to nominate to speak, etc. So quite often there'll be people rushing at the end because they've only just heard, for whatever reason. But to ask that they provide then written documentation, and again, this is people coming to a formal locally elected body. It's not going to be back of an envelope. They need to give it some consideration, etc. I pick up on the councillor's word. It does seem to be an impost or an additional barrier that I don't think enhances engagement. I think it does detract from it. So I'm of a mind to support this amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Nathan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To me, the issue becomes, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, Councillor McGinley, the issue is between a may and a must. That they can choose or they are commanded to give the, in this case, the proposed presentation draft. I'm curious as to why you have done this beyond what you have said, because in the few years that we've been together in this chamber, I have requested, and my colleagues seem to have been pleased with, the receiving of written information prior to our briefings, for example, so that we can be adequately prepared at the briefing to ask more germane questions of the staff or of a presenter. So for me, the must is an imperative for the staff to give us material wherever possible, on before a briefing agenda, and I would like to see the same respect given to the thoughts of our community, that they too give us the material in advance so that we can read it, so when they come here, instead of scribbling crazily and looking like we're not paying attention, we have actually prepared our questions in advance.
I'm happy to respond to that. Two things. You're drawing an analogy between a member of the public and a member of staff who are, for the most part, very highly paid professionals whose duty and job it is to actually provide us with information, as opposed to a member of the public who simply wants, even at the spur of the moment, to put their 2 bobs worth in. You picked up on the thing I'm talking about, May. Now, I'll just give you an example that happened today. A gentleman came in and spoke to us, Donald MacDonald, I believe is his name, who did provide us with his presentation maybe 3 or 4 days ago. Okay? That was his choice. If that works in his benefit and gives you and other people more time to consider it, good thinking on his part. But what I'm saying is we should not make that an imperative on every single person who wants to come and speak to us. Give them the choice. Don't be making them do what makes life easier for us, but more difficult for them. We're here to listen to them. It's not their job to make our job easy. It's their job to be able to express their views and for us to deal with it as it comes in. The imperative, I think, is wrong. It's not about us. It's not about efficiency of running this organisation. It's about allowing our people, our community, every opportunity to come in and talk to us.
I see some of your point, Councillor. However, we currently have a requirement that at 10 o'clock we do ask for the written presentations to be given to Council when they come in to give public forum.
And I would suggest, and I think I actually articulated it in there, that they may give us a written presentation if they want it recorded on our website. Again, I'll give you an example. I have seen speakers come in here who, I don't know if they can write or don't write, but they choose to speak from the heart and the head, and they come in and they speak off the cuff. They don't have a written presentation. They have 2 or 3 key points they'd like to make, and they walk in, they have not a bit of paper in front of them, and they simply talk to us. And then when someone says, well, can we have your presentation? He goes, well, I haven't got one, I've got 2 dot points. So it makes that redundant. Why should we not allow those kind of people who would like to come and talk not verbatim, but ad hoc, off the top of their head? Why should they be denied by insisting that they then have to give us a copy of that afterwards? It just seems like more bureaucracy, one more barrier to discourage a person from coming in and talk to us. So I would get rid of that requirement to provide the written presentation after their speech, unless they want to do so.
I'm going to ask members of the community. Councillors didn't interject whilst you were giving your presentations, so I'm going to ask that you please do not interject. If you want to have conversations or do that, please take it outside of the chamber. It is very distracting as councillors when we are trying to have a debate between your elected representatives and we are continuously getting interjections. I'm going to ask you not to do that. That right there would be an example of the type of rudeness that I would have come to expect from you, Mr. Parker. Okay, councillors, back to the matter at hand. And again, I will remind those members of the community, if you want to behave in that way, please take it out of the chamber. Councillor Brown, I think, was ahead of you. Councillor Nathan.
Councillor McGinley, I'm just... one of the purposes of having the conversation and having the written form from the person presenting is we can put that up on the website. Okay? Is that correct?
Patently, yes.
Yes, right, okay. So what you're saying is that the people who present are going to get an advantage over the people you're talking about that can't articulate in a manner in which they wish to express themselves, because they can't have their their written form put up on the website. So what you've got is you've actually got them and us, or the smart one and the dumb one, whatever terminology you want to use. One section of the community is advantaged because they actually put so it's not equitable. In the genuineness of what you're saying, it's not equitable that one person in the community, because they can read and write, can have their form up on the website, because that'll be what it is. You hand the form in the morning, it automatically goes up. Okay, that's the way it is now. If you come in and you don't present, you don't have that opportunity. So those people are being prejudiced in some way of not being able to have their presentation in written form up on the website. So you're saying we should get someone to scribe for them? Or should we film it, record it, type it up and put it up there for them? Is that what we're saying? Because there's inequity there.
Okay. I think you're clutching at straws there. I honestly do. The alternative to what you're suggesting is the person who is not good at writing simply doesn't have a voice at all. Because if they don't provide their presentation in writing prior to it, they're not going to be allowed to speak, full stop. That's even more inequitable. What I'm saying is everyone in our society has different advantages and disadvantages. I'm looking at opening up this public forum to the broadest possible section of people to take advantage of it as best they can so that they can be heard.
I think part of what you're discussing will be discussed further, Councillor, as far as the other topics that are in front of us to discuss. I believe, from my perspective, and I do see some of your points about making it more accessible to those that might not have the skills to write a formal presentation, but I believe that there are different opportunities in this modern world available to them. So I know that people, for example, with vision impairments, etc., use a voice-to-text type of system to get their words out, and then they are recorded, and then their printer will print them out. And I believe that, most of us also, notwithstanding that there are people, as you explained, that probably haven't got the same skills as others, but I think that as part of a community there is always somebody to help, and I cannot imagine the circumstance where somebody rang up explaining that that was their circumstance and our council administration wouldn't offer to help them with that. So I'm just putting those up for your consideration. Councillor Pollock.
Yeah, further to that, I know that over many years where people have felt challenged in that area, they have been assisted by people within this organisation to get the basic idea out. The one point that's been totally ignored over the whole idea of people providing written submissions on the day before is that it gives the staff a chance to investigate and respond, so that in actual fact there's far greater knowledge for councillors and people involved with concerns to address all of those issues. And I think that's just been completely overlooked. It's not an arbitrary, you must pull all of this information together. It gives an opportunity for further research and full consideration of the issue.
And just on that, Councillor, currently when somebody comes and speaks at public forum, there is no opportunity until it comes into debating that agenda item for the council staff to be asked questions. Just for clarity. Councillor Mayne.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Pollock, for your comment. I was going to ask the question on first principles, why is this change being explored? What isn't working at the moment? Because I don't think anything's not working, but I pick up on your point, Councillor Pollock, that you're suggesting that this would enhance engagement because staff would be able to have a heads up and then work with the council. Could I just seek clarification if that was the case then? So staff get 24 hours before the presentation, get the submission, that would go to staff. What would then staff do with that information to help enhance the council laws in preparation for the Tuesday? Just what's the difference then? Thank you.
I'll get the General Manager to answer that.
Through the Mayor, so your question, I think, but please clarify if it's incorrect. So at 12 o'clock the day before, when we have the list of speakers, you will be then sent the list of speakers and also their presentation. So that will go straight out. If it comes in the day before that, or the week before that, it will go out to you then. So as soon as we receive the submission, it will go to all of you as councillors in terms of your decision-making process.
Councillor Nathan.
Further to that, Madam Mayor, a couple of issues come to mind. I believe when we have had somebody speaking and they have, in that chair, they have perhaps mentioned some other resident or ratepayer's name, which can create an issue. Are you suggesting, for one, that if we had this information in advance, we would be able to advise the person in that chair to say something a little bit more obtuse rather than naming the individual, which could in fact create an issue legally, for example?
Yes, and we have had example of that, but it is a good question, and I would like to perhaps ask the General Manager about not only council's legal obligations, but also the obligations of presenters.
Through the Mayor, so certainly the situation that has been discussed, if it was indicated in a presentation that council received the day before, then certainly we could provide that advice that it would be best to not name the neighbour or what the issue was, so that privacy legislation would not be breached. Absolutely. So in relation to the Mayor's question, so it's been mentioned today that councillors do not have legal privilege within this meeting. They have a version of it, but they do not have parliamentary privilege. So it does potentially leave the council and therefore its ratepayers out for potential, my understanding, potential liability if something is released inappropriately, either breaching legislation, in particular privacy.
Councillors, I think we've discussed that part of your proposed amendment. Councillor McGinley or Councillor Constable?
Just a question through you, Madam Mayor. You highlighted something that was coming through in my thought processes, which was the association of voice and text, voice-to-text software. And the implementation of that. Even if we do get the written form the day before, and it has been raised. People do deviate, and we've seen experiences of that from the particular text. So we're not necessarily going to be, some surprises have come from that at times as well. Are we in a position, with the technologies available, in order to have those presenters and those presentations transcribed in that form so that they can be digitised and put on the web?
Councillor, my understanding is what is proposed is that once those presentations have been given to council, whether it is in public forum, is that then they will then be provided onto the council website for the public record, along with any responses from council. So I guess the short answer to your question is yes. Councillor McGinley, perhaps we'll move on to, and it doesn't stop us from going back to that, councillors. There's no rules of debate here, so you can talk about any given subject as many times as you like until your fellow councillors have, exhausted any questions. Councillor McGinley.
Thank you. I'll put forward a further amendment, and that is that clause 3.10 of the draft Code of Meeting Practice be amended so that it reads, each speaker will be allowed 5 minutes to address the council. A 3-minute extension of time may be granted if deemed appropriate by councillors by majority decision. So this is essentially saying, rather than cutting out the option of a 3-minute extension of time, it's simply to retain that.
Councillors, does anybody want to discuss or talk about that? I am perfectly comfortable with somebody having to make a presentation succinctly within 5 minutes, and I think that as you have rightfully brought up, Councillor McGinley, to give as many people the opportunity to come and present to councillors. If we limit it to 5 minutes and that still allows councillors opportunity to ask questions, that allows us to get through more speakers in the allotted time. If we are allowing an extension of 3 minutes, we are potentially reducing the numbers of members of our community that can come and speak. Councillor Nathan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Possibly it's not well known, but in another aspect of my life, I was an adjudicator and debater in both New South Wales and federal level. And it became very obvious way back in those days that there were those who chose to obfuscate and continue beyond what was recognised in the debate forum. What I would like to see is not only a 5-minute limit, but I would actually like to see a very discreet little tinkle, as in to just say, hey, hang on a minute, you got 1 minute or 30 seconds to wrap up. That is standard international debating and public speaking format. And I know we are trying to encourage people to come and to speak in a loose and easy fashion, but I would recommend that the people who are nervous would in fact practice in front of a mirror and with a clock so that they know that the things that they want to say and they want to underline and underscore and repeat will be within their allotted time.
Something for us to consider. So what you're suggesting is that could we potentially give a 1-minute reminder? We could do that. Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am in support of a defined time without an extension. Even while in this chamber, I have always voted to provide the speakers with an extension of time, whether that be for 5 minutes or 8 minutes. That's up for the chamber to decide. But I particularly, it was brought to the fore today that there was a perception of favouritism to speakers that you wanted to hear and some that you didn't. And I think that should be removed so that we do have a defined time. Possibly the 5 minutes, I'm unsure whether the 5 minutes is sufficient, probably 6 or 7. 7 sounds a good number to me. It is because everyone seems to get through after their extension in that period of time. So I'd just like to throw that out. Thank you.
Councillor Mayne.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Councillor Constable. So were you looking at, instead of the 5, so getting rid of the 3, instead of the 5, they're going to a 6, 5, like a hedge midpoint sort of thing?
Madam Mayor, 6 or 7, something that's acceptable, because on most instances we have been granting those people that extension.
Yeah.
And there have been the odd occasions when that hasn't been granted. But I think if we looked at a 7-minute period, we'd probably cover the bases and then have that as a defined cut-off point.
Thanks, Councillor. Madam Mayor, just as a follow-up, I'm just going again to the first principle. We've had 10 speakers today. I think we had one go over. I don't see us staying back late any nights. We're only here once a fortnight, 18 meetings a year, so we're not here a lot. So I get the argument that says that there's the 5 and the 3, you need to be disciplined, cut down to the 5 and all the rest of them. But let's step back and go to the big picture. 18 meetings a year, we don't run over too often. I don't sure how many times over, well, we've been nearly 3 years as a council that we've gone over 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. We just don't do that. So what we have in place at the moment works. It does afford the community that sometimes come here and find it difficult to articulate, because we all know, anyone who's done public speaking, that when you get your bit of paper, you practice it at home. But when you come here and you're in this environment and people stumble, get confused, miss the point, they're having a heart moment, they want to talk it through, I just look at the 5+3. Obviously, I've voted on a principle because we've had it, so I'll support it. But I don't think it's broken at all. I think it does work. And to walk away from that, I think would be a backward step. Thanks.
Councillors, I'll just draw your attention to, in our current code, our new code, and it is mandatory, that a councillor must not, without the consent of the council, speak more than once on a motion or an amendment for longer than 5 minutes at any one time. So the 5 minutes is defined. It's a mandatory definition, and my personal view is, I think if it's good enough for us to have to articulate our views within a 5-minute time frame, I think we should have the expectation of our community that they do the same thing. Councillor Thompson.
Look, I think 5 minutes is fine as well, but the point is, if the speaker isn't finished or there's more we want to know, we can always ask questions. So there is that way of, informal extension.
I agree. Councillors, is there any more to be discussed on that amendment? Councillor, you did skip an amendment. Was that intentionally?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Sorry, just one more word on that one. Yes, we can ask questions, and then we have to go through the charade by saying, are you aware that you didn't finish, and would you like to finish? I mean, if they haven't finished, you don't get the opportunity to ask questions about the bit you didn't hear. Okay, so that's my riposte, if you like, to that one. But I get where you're coming from. We can give them more time, but only on the bit that we've heard. And let's face it, as Councillor Main pointed out, we're not here for 12 hours doing massive shifts here, as some councils actually do. And I think it gives councillors that opportunity, should they wish to vote for it. And we saw an example today where there was a speaker who had, I think, most of us engrossed, because most of us put our hands up, who did require that extra 3 minutes. And we had that opportunity to say, this is interesting, I want to hear more, have your extra 3 minutes. If we put this in the code of meeting practice, it's just gone. So it doesn't matter what someone's saying, how engrossing they are, what great information most of us think we're hearing, we can't ask for more. So I think keep it in as an option. Again, why put another barrier there?
So, Councillor, do you want to put your Amendment 4 forward?
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'll just check it out here. Okay, then my next amendment, and it will be now Amendment 3, just as if we're going through it. That clause 312 of the draft Code of Meeting Practice be amended so that it reads, public forum will be webcast and retained on Council's website as part of the record of the proceedings of Council. And it's pretty obvious what that's about.
Councillors, I'll throw it open to your discussion. Notwithstanding that once we do go back out of Committee of the Whole, if you want to, you will be given the opportunity to debate. You'll be asked to be succinct, and you will be given one opportunity to speak either for or against any of the amendments or the motion, but you may ask questions. Councillor Mayne.
Oh, thanks, Madam Mayor. I think we heard some really terrific presentations today, and I'll just pick up a couple of the points to unpack this important amendment. Look, we live in one of the more aged demographics in New South Wales. We know that. So therefore, we also know that a lot of people are housebound, challenged to get out. We have a number of people who live with disabilities. We have a number of mums and dads who are working as we speak, who will only watch the cut and thrust of the wonderful public presentations that we all saw and benefit from today if they log on down to the track. We know, well, I've been advised that, as I said earlier, that is it the Bugle from Braidwood are probably online watching, as are ABC, as are 2EC, who are literally the media, big shout out to you, who are watching this debate, who watch the public come in to debate and raise these points with us today. That's how they access this. Not sitting at a dry bit of Hansard, which effectively presentations will become, just put up on a website, the most passive form of social media that we have. Are we seriously saying that's the best in a contemporary social media age we can do on communications and engaging with our public? We can, a bit of type paper, whack it on a website and say to the community, can't access it, to the media, etc., fill your boots, go and get a sense of where our community's at by reading through that document. What a nonsense. We know that most people in social media world these days, if they spend 2 to 3 sentences on a news story that comes through, you're lucky. It's very, very hard to get people's attention. We have this wonderful forum here that has worked, thank you to the previous councillors and the previous council, that put us as one of the leaders in New South Wales, and we're going to walk back from that. What an absolute nonsense for this Shire to even be contemplating that. I did not vote for this motion to go out because I think it's such a retrograde step. I welcome Councillor McGinley's courage for putting this amendment. I strongly encourage my fellow councillors in seriously good faith. Those presentations this morning were heartfelt, genuine, intelligent. I haven't heard a good reason why we'd be doing this. I just haven't heard. I don't think it's there. So what's sitting behind why this council will look to shut this down? It is an absolute sad day if we move this way forward. Please consider this. Great amendment, councillor. Thank you.
Councillor Tate.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I can answer it for you, Anthony. It's political. Simple as that, pal, and you know it. It's political. Every one of those things this morning was political. It has been for the last, 12, 15 months? All politics, all political. That's why.
Councillor, I'm going to remind members of our community, we did not interject and talk over the top of you when you were making your presentations. I will ask you for the same courtesy to be shown to my fellow councillors and myself whilst we are debating. Councillor Mayne, I'll just raise a couple of subjects, things for you to consider on the subject of media. Currently, there is nothing stopping journalists, which they do on any given subject, from interviewing and talking to and getting both sides of a debate or issue with members of our community, or in fact with members of this council. Currently, many of the reporters that I speak to on a regular basis do take that opportunity, so that they may have representations from members of our community on a subject. They will then come and ask through either our council communications team or directly with myself to give council's perspective. That won't stop. Journalists can still come here and report on meetings, just as they have always done. If a journalist believes what is being presented in public forum is newsworthy, they will no doubt, as they should, report on it. They don't need to require recordings to do that. In fact, I think that a good journalist would use the opportunity to speak directly with those that do make heartfelt presentations to get, as you say frequently, to unpack and ventilate issues. In fact, I would argue with you that relying on webcast is not accurate reporting because it only puts one side of the story. And I believe that what we are proposing to do, and that is put written presentations onto council website, allows us the opportunity at council to give council's response to any of the criticisms, constructive or otherwise, or any of the views that presenters may bring to this chamber. Therefore, allowing our community to hear different points of views or council's perspective on those given subjects, just for your consideration. Councillor Nathan.
Madam Mayor, obviously I wasn't part of the elected body that voted for live streaming, full stop, the global situation. I was wondering whether you, Councillor Pollock or Councillor Brown, could give us some of your thinking back then and why public forum was included as part of that global package.
Because at that time, the public forum was part of the council meeting. Now, it's my understanding that we have been given advice that the public forum should not be part of the council meeting, and that the role of the council at a council meeting is to make decisions, and that public forum should not be part of the council meeting. Councillor McGinley.
Just a clarification there. My understanding of the wording is that the purpose of the council is primarily about decisions, not solely, and I think public discourse is part also of the council meeting.
Just ask for some clarity from the General Manager on that.
I'm waiting.
Through the Mayor, so this is from this document, which is Office of Local Government, Model Code of Meeting Practice for Local Councils in New South Wales. So what, just so we had the exact quote, public forums should not be held as part of a council or committee meeting. Council or committee meetings should be reserved for decision making by the council or committee of council.
Councillor Mayne.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. Just to follow on from our discussion, why I think it's really important to ensure the public and the fourth estate, the media, get a chance to see, to hear the cut and thrust, the interaction. What we're looking to propose is we are going to reduce the 8 presenters today, and a number of them made points. They were ad-libbing at different points, etc. We're going to reduce their commentary down to a piece of paper. So what we actually do is deny the media an opportunity to see, to engage in the debate by seeing the questions, the interactions, the body language, etc. That in itself is a part of engagement. Now, we also know that in Australia, we've got a real challenge at the moment. We've seen the decimation of Fairfax. We're lucky we've got someone from Fairfax here. We've seen the rise of social media with the Beagle. But again, it's a real critical interface that we ensure that we're providing the information, that we're not controlling the information. What we're doing is looking to, I think, effectively shut down a debate. Because this is how this gets out to our public. Otherwise, you've got to come in here to see it. Now, if Mr Parker's sick, if the young lady from Fairfax isn't in here, who reported it? How did it get out? You've got to go to our website, and let's be really realistic here. Do people do that? Look, I don't know. It's a question of clarification.
Yes, they
But
do.
again, we're reducing it down to a static bit of paper. I just heard Councillor Nathan talk about her debating experience, and she would well know, in debate, the art of debate, it's not just what's said, it's how it's delivered. There's a lot of nuance in communication that we are now looking to walk away from. Thank you.
Excuse me, those members of our community that are having a conversation, if you'd like to have a conversation, I'd invite you to take it outside, please. Again, I will remind you, we did not do this to you whilst you were presenting to the chamber. Just some common courtesy.
We weren't insulted by Councillor Tate.
Oh, shock and
That
horror.
was an absolute insult. You should have brought him to account.
Councillor Tate is entitled to his views. If you have anything that you want to say, you can take that as a code of conduct. And I will ask you again, as members of our community, please show us the same courtesy that we showed to you. We did not interject. We did not interject, and if you cannot refrain from interjecting, and you cannot show some respect and some control, then I will ask you to take it out of the chamber. Councillor Pollock.
In the fairly lengthy period that I've been associated with this organisation, I've seen public access abused, I've seen questions from councillors abused, and to the point where the business of council has not commenced before 2 and 3 o'clock and later in the afternoon. So a lot of the, if you like, protocols around the conduct of council meetings and public access and public forum have been formed through the experience of people that have abused the system. The other aspect, which has been very, very clear all of the long period of time and still occurs today, is when there is an issue which affects particular people, they get here and they express their point of view, either individually or in numbers in the gallery. If it doesn't specifically affect them individually, they keep away in their masses. So it's always a matter of the particular issue is reflected in the public participation and attendance. Nothing will change.
Councillor Nathan.
I'm still grappling, Madam Mayor, with the issue of the conflating in people's minds of live streaming of the primary purpose of us sitting here on the 18 Tuesdays that we do, and the webcasting of public forum. I think that there is a perception that we are trying to hide behind closed doors in terms of the debate, which is our purpose of being here, and decision-making on these Tuesdays. I see that very different to the webcasting of public forum where members of the public come in to speak on the matter that we are in fact going to make our decision on that Tuesday. It's almost like you can't possibly have thought about it, you can't possibly have considered, you couldn't possibly have read about it, and therefore I, with all good intent, come in and sit in the chair over there and attempt to persuade differently. One thing about persuading differently is one issue, but the other is the necessity or the perceived necessity that council provides a platform for those views. My understanding is that OLG has recommended that public forum no longer be part of the agenda of a council meeting, in our case on a Tuesday, but be held at a different time to circumvent a number of very serious legal issues that seem to be rearing their ugly head as a result of the ease of communication with, amongst other things, social media.
Councillor McGinley, other amendments?
Indeed I have. Okay, the fourth amendment I'll mention now, and I'll read it out, is that the following changes occur to the draft Code of Meeting Practice. 1. Clauses 10.5, 10.7 and 10.8 be deleted. Clause 10.6 be changed so that it reads, the decision of the chairperson as to the result of a vote is final. 3. The following clause be added so that it reads, all voting at council meetings, including meetings that are close to the public, must be recorded in the minutes of meetings with the names of councillors who voted for and against each motion or amendment, including the use of the casting vote, being recorded. 4. Clauses 10.5 to 10.13 be renumbered to reflect deleted and added clauses. There is also a note here that if clause 10.5, 10.7 and 10.8 are so far mandatory within there, in other words, they're the bits in black within the Model Code of Practice, and they cannot be deleted unless the additional clause as listed above is added instead. So to try and clarify that, what I'm basically saying, all those clauses that talk about a person wishing to ask for a division and then being seconded theoretically, or asking that a dissenting vote be recorded, they can all be gotten rid of if we simply accept what was actually one of the recommendations in red, a recommended clause from the Model Code of Practice, which was, as I've read, and it basically means that when councillors are asked to vote and they put their hands up, they're recorded as for or they're recorded as against, and it's just done as a matter of course. I've actually also put additional words in there to the effect that if everybody puts their hand up, you don't have to write the names 9 times, you just say it was unanimous. But basically, the minutes record how people voted on every issue. Simple as that.
Councillor, I have no problem with what you're proposing. However, and it is completely on you as councillors. There have been numerous times when I have had to remind councillors to please that I do need to see your hands. If we are going to do that, it will require, because as capable as our minutes secretary is, it is very difficult at times to, even from the chair, to make sure I get to see everyone's votes. So if we go ahead with that, which I have no problem with, I'm going to say to councillors, you will have to keep your hand in the air for a slightly longer period of time than just sometimes the mandatory up and down. So that's just my observation.
I concur with that, and that would have to be a minor change of behaviour on the part of councillors.
I think we can manage it, councillor.
I think we can.
Councillor, any other amendments?
Yes. The next one is that the draft Code of Meeting Practice be amended as follows. Clause 2.33 be deleted. And clause 233 is simply in the current draft that each councillor may put a maximum of 2 questions with notice to any meeting. I'd like to simply delete that clause because I can see no need why a councillor could not, for example, put 3 or 4 questions at any particular meeting.
Or potentially 50.
or potentially 50. And that would
So-
be dealt with as a matter of process.
Councillor, this has been our current practice. We can change it, but I perhaps would refer back to perhaps Councillor Pollock's experience of a time when councillors were allowed to ask as many questions as they like and what that experience did look like in this chamber. Councillor Pollock?
I think I outlined it before.
I don't know what you mean by.
There you go.
Perhaps you might want to elaborate on that somewhat then, Councillor. So, sorry, Councillor. My understanding of what you were outlining before was that in times gone past, there were councillors that did take it as an opportunity to ask numerous questions, and it would take a considerable amount of time to go through, and that those councillors were using it moreover as an opportunity to undermine council staff, to grandstand, to politicise certain subjects. Councillor Nathan.
I think, Madam Mayor, the word that we were all looking for was filibuster. The question then becomes, is 2 an appropriate number? Could we perhaps find a compromise at 3 or 4, but certainly limit it to a very narrow, less than on one hand?
Can I just make a comment? I believe one of the first actions I did as a councillor here was to come in and ask 6 questions on notice on a particular issue, and no one batted an eye. So I'm just wondering, did I just get away with it?
Perhaps you did, Councillor, but if that was something that was to be repeated, not only by yourself but also by your fellow councillors, you can imagine it would be quickly become unwielding, and that we would not be able to get to the business of the day.
Sorry, I just had a comment from Councillor Pollock saying that those questions were on notice, and clause 233 is referring to questions with notice. So just clarifying that. But to reply to Councillor Nathan, I like the idea. I mean, I obviously can see how nonsensical it would be if someone wanted to put 50 questions up. But I can also see how I could ask question 1 subsection A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, Y, and question 2 subsections A, B, C, D, E, F, G, Y, and get around it that way. I think there's an element of trust and goodwill that has to be accepted, rather than trying to make rules to think for every possible exception that people could use. I'd go for 6 questions as a compromise.
If you multiplied 6 questions by 9 councillors, potentially, Councillor, I understand what you're saying, but if you're going to make, if you're going to set it into our code, then that is what you're saying, is that potentially 9 councillors could put 6 questions on notice up. I think it would become unwielding. Councillor Brown.
Just as an aside, I spoke to a general manager of a regional council just a couple of months ago, and in their council, one councillor in the first 12 months of that council asked over 2,000 questions on notice. It can be there, it can be abused, so I'm just saying, and a lot of those didn't get through to being council questions because they were so inappropriate for their agenda items. It still created an extraordinary amount of work for that particular council to manage. So I think the number 2 is quite happy. 2 by the number of councillors is quite enough.
I think the question is, where in the last 2 or 3 years of this council has that aspect of the code of meeting practice constrained or reduced anybody's ability to pursue any issue within this chamber?
Councillor Constable, did you want to ask or enter into the debate?
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. I was just after the history of why the 2 was decided upon as a definitive number. Was it in your time, Councillor Brown? It was obviously in Councillor Pollock's.
I don't remember it being in my term of previously, but I think that the experience expressed about councillors misusing that was the reason why 2 questions have been nominated. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, just quickly, also too, and you allude to the point that you've made as well, Madam Mayor, is that this policy, once it's approved, will travel through into the next council. We don't know the type of councillor or person that's likely to be elected. At this particular council, we have councillors who respect the questions on those with the limits of 2, and it's going quite well. This policy will actually be in place for the first 12 months of the next council. So we're actually having to think in advance and protect the next group of councillors in some ways to ensure that the continuing of business, and we all knew what the first 12 months here was like, to have numerous questions on notice will just slow the whole process down and won't be as efficient as it has been in the past with our review of all our 120 odd policies. So this policy will be reviewed again within 12 months of the new council. They can make the changes then as it suits them. At the moment, we have to be in some ways respectful of that new council coming in to ensure that they have the structure in which they can actually do their duty in the most efficient, most capable manner they can and not be caught up in the politics. As I said, we don't know who's likely to be next year. We could have, for example, let's say, for example, the Labor Party put a team up. They will come in and they'll have to have the Labor Party endorsed candidates, the Green endorsed candidates, and they'll have to have their structure and their processes, and they'll put their agendas forward. So we just don't know what's likely to happen in the next council meeting. So I just think that the status quo as to is quite appropriate.
Councillors, I think if we have... Oh, sorry, you did have one more amendment. My apologies, Councillor.
That's okay. Well, I actually still got 2. I was going to put an amendment in regard to the council's public access, regarding council's public access session. I think I won't mention that as it's been superseded by the changes you've made yourself. So I'll omit that one just for benefit of councillors who are looking. However, in clause 3.7, and I don't have the actual words for this, but I just asked the General Manager to consider this. In clause 3.7, it currently says the General Manager or their delegate may refuse an application to speak at a public forum. The General Manager or their delegate must give reasons in writing for a decision to refuse an application. That just seems a little too broad to me, and it's not clear when you have to give the reasons in writing to that person that has been refused. Could that be amended slightly on, and I'll take your suggestions for words, to just make it a bit clearer that the person will receive their written refusal before the morning they would be expecting to speak?
Through the Mayor, so an amendment along those lines could be, and I'll just pick up, must give reasons in writing by 5 p.m. the business day prior to the meeting for a decision to refuse an application.
Thank you. And sorry, I still have one final amendment, and it was one that I skipped before. And I was going to ask that clause 3.9 be deleted and that clause 3.8 be amended. And I was going to look at speakers being heard in the order of the application to address councillors. But I've thought about this. But what I do find difficult to accept is that people will be asked when they give their notification or presentation whether they're going to be for or against a particular motion. I just find, yet again, that's one more imposition, one more discouragement for people to come forward. And there may be people who have bits of it they like and bits of it they don't like, and some of them they just want to have a comment. So again, it's putting the onus more on the public to say, I'm against this or I'm for this. And the obvious reason is to facilitate, should there be a large number of people, that somehow we can hear from people who have positive or negative goals. But I think we're getting too much into the nitty-gritty there and just being a little bit too controlling yet again.
Look, and Councillor, I take your point, but I will just draw you to, in section 3.3, it says in the final sentence, council meeting, on the agenda of the day, council meeting, the person wishes to speak on and should state. So it's not saying that they have to, it's not saying it's mandatory, we're saying that they should state whether they wish to speak for or against an item. Because you're right, somebody may like elements, they might dislike other elements, some people may be, not have a strong view either way. But the word is should.
Okay, we come to that should word again. I'd much prefer may state. It makes it much more clear that it's not mandatory and there's no obligation to do so.
We could change it to read may state.
Thank you.
Yes. Got it? Councillor Nathan, Councillor Brown then.
Just going on, thank you, Madam Mayor, further with that discussion, pardon me though, in 3.8 it mentions potentially limit the number of speakers of up to 3 to speak for or against any item of business. I was wondering whether it would be appropriate to put in to speak about, so that the people, or a word that enables the general discussion, neither for specifically or against specifically, but certainly from, if you like, crossbenchers. If we could find a word that could go in there, then I think that would resolve it, because then that would give us potentially 9 speakers, 3 for, 3 against, and 3 from crossbenchers.
Through the Mayor, so 3.8 has been drafted to be specifically flexible for council. So what it says is that firstly, if there are more speakers than time permits, you can extend the public forum session by 15 minutes and potentially limit the number of speakers of up to 3, 4 or against on any item. But it's potentially, you could also say that you are going to do something a little bit differently, like hear up to 5 speakers. So it's potentially limit. It's not saying that council will or should, or so it's providing some flexibility in relation to what council might do on a particular day.
On the lines of that flexibility, General Manager, could it not also be that if we had a topic, for example, that was of particular interest to our community, and we did see that we were going to have effectively more speakers than time allocated, and those speakers, hypothetically, say there's 30 speakers want to come and speak on a given subject, we could as council potentially defer the matter to allow those speakers to come into public forum at the next council meeting. What the General Manager is explaining is flexibility that's embedded within the code to allow us to address the circumstances. It happens fairly rarely of where there would be more speakers than the time would allow.
So just to further what the Mayor has said, in clause 3.23, it reads, in the unusual circumstance that council is proposing a significant issue, a dedicated public forum session can be facilitated should the need arise. So that provides that option. So if we know, for example, and I've gone back through the meetings for the last 12 plus months, situations such as the rural lands strategy or planning proposal and the recreation and open space strategy had a number of speakers. So we would know that in advance and potentially then have a separate forum for those particular items. In the case that something comes up unexpectedly and council does not wish to potentially have 3 speakers for or against or some other number, then what would happen is that council could resolve, as the Mayor said, to defer an item and either hold a special forum if it's a really big issue that we hadn't predicted, or in fact have it at the next public forum session. So it's trying to provide examples of where we can manage, or council can manage speakers in a fair way.
So, councillors, I believe that we've had opportunity to discuss Councillor McGinley's amendments. Is there any further debate that you wish to conduct before we go out of Committee of the Whole? Councillor Brown, you also brought up a small amendment that you wanted for us to consider as well.
I was just going to put that at the...
That one change.
Yeah, just that one change when we speak at when we go back into committee. Yeah, it's all right.
That's fine. Councillor Constable.
Through you, Madam Mayor, thank you very much. Under the suggested code of meeting practice, the public forum is not part of the council meeting. I just want to confirm that the code of conduct and provisions and code of meeting practice adhere to that forum.
Yes, they do. Just one moment, though. I'm going to get some clarity on something. So for clarity, Councillor, code of meeting practice will be adhered to, but members of the community are not under any obligation of code of conduct. So, councillors, I need a mover and a seconder to go back into normal council meeting. Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Nathan. All those in favour? We are now back onto the agenda. And as was discussed, councillors, we have a Code of Meeting Practice, agenda item GMR 19/010. We have a fellow councillor that has put forward some suggested amendments. I think it is prudent that we deal with each of those amendments as were presented by our fellow councillor McGinley. So, councillor, we will start with your amendment number 1. Which is that clause 3.3 of the draft Code of Meeting Practice be amended so that it reads, and the following is up there. Need a seconder for your amendment to be debated.
Madam Mayor, just the bottom point, this will apply to all further... Thank you.
So I need a seconder, councillors, so that this can be debated. Seconded by Councillor Mayne. Councillors, I remind you, you are now back into normal council debating processes. So, councillors, anyone wishing to speak, I would suggest anyone wishing to speak against it might start, and councillor, you can hold your right to close the debate on this amendment subject, if you choose.
Thank you. I don't want to open the debate. I'd just simply like to formally ask for a division on this and all subsequent amendments that come up for the vote.
No problem at all, councillor. Councillor Mayne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Constable McKinley. Oh, and Constable as well, of course. But Councillor McKinley, for your thought behind this. I just picked up in the Committee of the Whole 2 words just stuck in my head. One was, I think they both, the word perception is critical here. It is perception. A lot of this is absolute perception management by this council. And perception indeed can be reality, because, Councillor, you made the comment about barriers, not wanting to impose barriers. This is a potential barrier. There are a couple of potential barriers being, and even if they're only symbolic barriers, the perception is they are a barrier. Then you compound it by taking away the live streaming, and you got to then go to our DP, which we talk about collaborative and engaged communities. It's one of our pillars of our DP. I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So I think it's an important amendment, and I look forward to supporting it.
Councillor, I'll ask you to wrap it up on this amendment.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I think the Committee of the Whole allowed councillors to express their views and myself to defend it, so I won't spend too much time on this, other than that I do ask my councillors to remain flexible and do be considerate of the collective intent of these amendments, which is genuinely to make it as easy as possible and to put as few barriers in front of our public for being able to meaningfully engage with us. And I commend the motion. Well, sorry, the amendment.
Councillors, we've been asked for a division, so I'm going to put the amendment to the vote. Those in favour? Those in favour are Councillors Mayne and Councillor McGinley. Those against are myself, Councillor Innes, Councillor Brown, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Nathan, Councillor Tate, Councillor Constable and Councillor Pollock. The amendment is lost. Councillor, I'll ask you to put your second proposed amendment.
So I'll just have to read it from up there. That clause 310 of the draft code of meeting practice be amended so that it reads, each speaker will be allowed 5 minutes to address the council. A 3-minute extension of time may be granted if deemed appropriate by councillors by majority decision.
Do I have a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by Councillor Mayne. Councillors, are there any questions or debate?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I foreshadow a changed motion if this one is lost, that the time be specified as 7 minutes per speaker with no extension. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, I'll put the amendment as stands. Those in favour? There's been a division called. Those voting for are Councillors Mayne, Councillor Constable, Councillor McGinley. Those against are myself, Councillor Innes, Councillor Brown, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Nathan, Councillor Tate and Councillor Pollock. The amendment is lost. We now have a foreshadowed amendment. I'll just slow down a little bit. It now reads that each speaker will be, this is your foreshadowed amendment, that each speaker will be allowed 7 minutes to address the council. Ooh. And that this time is to be strictly enforced by the chairperson. It's in the code. So that has been moved by Councillor Constable, seconded by Councillor Tate. Councillors, I'll put... Oh.
So, Madam Mayor, could I just get a calculation in terms of... I get the thinking, and I applaud the thinking, though moving from 5 to 7, because then that becomes... That's it, it's locked in stone as opposed to 5 and the 3, so that's a mathematical variable just got put on the table. given we're looking at an hour now with the possible 15-minute extension, is this better or worse than what's on the table?
You get 8 instead of 12.
Is that how it works?
You would potentially get 8 speakers, but that is also contingent on how many questions from councillors. So it can never be a definite number.
Through you, Madam. I was going to close the debate, but...
Did anyone want to debate or ask any questions, councillors?
Yes. When we say each speaker be allowed 7 minutes to address the council, I presume that my suggestion of a warning be somewhere in, it doesn't need to be in the Code of Meeting Practice. Okay, so that's good. The other thing that I think what Councillor Constable has done is taken out any suggestion of favouritism. There was some discussion from the floor that we vote for or against an extension of 3 minutes on a parochial, personal, whatever basis without any objective assessment. I think that by making it a mandatory 7 minutes max, we take away that suggestion of favouritism or defavouritism, if there's such a word.
Councillor Constable, would you... Oh, sorry. Councillor Thompson.
I just think that with 5 minutes we can hear more people, hear more of the public. I think the longer you give, the less people you hear.
Councillor McGinley.
I'd just also like to comment, would the same clause be referenced in the changed part of this motion, which refers to public access, because it also had a paragraph limited to 5 minutes. So if this gets up, would that also apply to public access as well as public forum?
Yes, we will also apply it to public access.
Thank you.
Councillor Constable.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I just commend the motion. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, we've been asked for a division. Those in favour of the amendment are myself, Councillor Innes, Councillor Nathan, Councillor Tate, Councillor Constable, Councillor McGinley and Councillor Mayne. Those against are Councillor Pollock, Councillor Thompson and Councillor Brown. The amendment has been carried. Councillor, your next proposed amendment.
Pardon me. The next amendment is that clause 3.12 of the draft Code of Meeting Practice be amended so that it reads, public forum will be webcast and retained on Council's website as part of the record of the proceedings of Council.
Can I have a seconder, please? Seconded by Councillor Mayne. Councillors, any questions or debate?
I have a question, Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councillor
The
Nathan.
advice that we have been given by the Office of Local Government is that public forum should not be part of the council meeting. Yes? It needs to be held before. The implication of having public forum, therefore webcast, means that the webcasting, if it were to go ahead, would in fact be outside of that council meeting. I have some really serious questions on that. Thank you.
Now's the time to ask them then, Councillor. Councillor Mayne.
Sorry.
We've lost one of our councillors.
Do you want to follow those questions? No? No, okay. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Mayor. So on this important amendment, just to harp on a couple of points obviously I've been articulating today, and again the issues around any perception management that is important for this Shire. We live in an important and ever-evolving landscape. We have a landscape on the international space where former senior mayors, Rudy Giuliano, can come out and say things like truth is not truth. We can hear presidents talk about fake news. Well, what we have here is a real chance to eliminate that, because the public get to watch first hand what's being said here, what's being engaged, what the nature of the debate is. The media get to watch first hand. What we potentially, if we don't support this, we are voting therefore to remove that, to put on a piece of paper up on our web page. So we're actually diminishing transparency. How in goodness is that going to enhance the reputation of this Shire Council that keeps saying it's on about engagement and transparency? It's anathema to that. It's actually the opposite end. So thank you for the courage of putting up this amendment. It's very important for our Shire.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I've just got a question and probably trying to enunciate or grab what Councillor Nathan was mentioning. But the wording of the motion itself and saying Council's website to record the proceedings of Council, given that the public forum isn't part of the Council meeting, is that word proceedings of Council appropriate in the motion?
Councillors, I think whether or not it is considered part of the council meeting or not, the subject is about the webcasting of public forum. So it's going to get down to whether you believe that we should still publicly webcast or not. Councillor Nathan.
Coming to the questions that are foreshadowed, or one of them. If public forum is not part of the council meeting and we choose or vote to webcast that meeting, that section, the public forum, which is not part of the meeting, where does that leave us for any other space where council provides a space for people to communicate? Where does it begin or end our obligation to live stream those? That's one of the issues that I'm foreshadowing and questioning in this digital age.
Councillor McGinley.
Assuming everyone's had their...
I'm going to... no, I haven't, but are there any other comments or debate councillors wish to enter into on the subject of webcasting? Councillor Nathan, I believe that you did have a comment you wanted to make. You don't have to. Just saying now's your opportunity to do it, otherwise it will be passed.
I have a statement that will be for the entire motion,
Okay.
in fact.
You can hold it off till then. That's entirely appropriate. So, councillors, you can wind up.
Okay, thank you very much. It was quite deliberate to use the words part of the record of the proceedings of council, because the public forum does form one part of informing the decisions that we're here to make. So I chose those words quite consciously. On I also...
Councillor, I sincerely apologise. I believe it's probably opportune time for me, prior to you winding up, because Councillor Nathan is going to leave her comments till the end, but I think that given your amendment, for me, it's time for me to I was going to do the same thing and hold it off till right at the end, but I think it's probably more important that I do it at this time. If you would indulge me, Councillor, and then you will have the opportunity to close the amendment.
Not a
discussion.
problem.
I apologise. Councillors, I have given this very careful consideration of whether I support webcasting of the public forum session or not. I'm going to ask members of our public to please, if you want to have a conversation, take it outside. I have had the privilege and responsibility of being elected by my community to represent them in this chamber for 7 years, nearly 3 as elected mayor. During the past 12 months, I've met with members of my community or attended events in excess of 120 times. I've received over 1,000 emails, and this is all part of the democratic process. As mayor, every email is responded to. I was one of the councillors that voted to implement live streaming, and unfortunately, I have come to the decision not to support the continuation of live streaming of the public forum. Not the public forum, but I repeat, the live streaming of the public forum. Why? For me, it comes down to responsibilities and codes of conduct. Councillors, rightfully so, must comply with a mandatory code of conduct. We should not knowingly deceive, defame, or bring council into disrepute. If we do, there are consequences. The same code of conduct does not apply to members of the community who address council in this chamber in public forum. In recent times, there has been a most disappointing trend by a small group of repeat presenters, and I repeat, small, who have abused the opportunity to engage with councillors and instead have used it to harass, bully, make defamatory comments and continuously promote misinformation, and to also make defamatory and derogatory comments continuously about members of our staff. Whilst I believe this type of behaviour reflects very poorly on those who utilise public forum in such a negative manner, the issue is that it is being broadcast live. There's an example of it right there. Once said, a defamatory or untrue statement is immediately out in the public arena. I do not feel compelled to continue supporting this type of behaviour. Council will still provide members of our community with a chance to address council and engage with councillors in public forum, and also the presentation that they provide will be made available and kept on record via the council website along with any response from council. This will complement all parts of the community engagement process on a project or issue and provides the community with a clear picture on what information council has used to make its decision. This will ensure that the whole picture is presented to the community, not just the final stages of community consultation. It will ensure that views expressed through the process of community consultation, engagement and submissions will not be overridden or devalued by those who choose to address council at the end of the process directly before a decision is made. There is no other level of government you can address personally prior to making a decision. I stand against your amendment, Councillor.
Thank you. I was just about to give you your 5-minute thing. I was only kidding. I'd just like to close out, if you like, on that particular item by just reiterating, I think there must have been 3 or 4 different presenters this morning informed us that lots of other councils in our immediate neighbourhood seem to be able to deal with the issues that arise from public forum being webcast. Yes, it can get a little bit messy, and yes, it can get embarrassing, but that's democracy is like that. It's like a lot of other areas of life. That's the reality, and I think we have to find ways of fixing it or alleviating it other than just dumping everything out the window. So I commend the motion. Please don't go backwards on this one.
Councillors, you've been asked for a division on this. I'm going to put the amendment to you. Those for the amendment? Those for the amendment are Councillors Mayne and Councillor McGinley. Those councillors against the amendment are myself, Councillor Innes, Councillor Brown, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Nathan, Councillor Tate, Councillor Constable and Councillor Pollock. Your amendment is lost, Councillor. There you go, perfect example of the type of disrespect from members of our community. Thank you very much for your point of view. Councillor, you can put your next amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The amendment is that the following changes occur to the draft Code of Meeting Practice. 1. Clause 10.5, 10.7 and 10.8 be deleted. 2. Clause 10.6 be changed so that it reads, the decision of the chairperson as to the result of a vote is final. 3. The following clause be added so that it reads, all voting at council meetings, including meetings that are closed to the public, must be recorded in the minutes of the meetings with the names of the councillors who voted for and against each motion or amendment, including the use of the casting vote being recorded. 4. Clauses 10.5 to 10.13 be renumbered to reflect deleted and added clauses.
I'd be happy to second your amendment, Councillor. Councillors, any questions or debate? I'll put the amendment. We've been asked for a division. Those in favour? Those in favour are myself, Councillor Innes, Councillor Mayne, Councillor Nathan, Councillor Tate, Councillor Constable and Councillor McGinley and Councillor Pollock. Those against are Councillors Brown and Councillor Thompson. Councillor.
I'll just wait for the screen to roll up. I can't remember which one.
Just to remind councillors, this amendment is referring to the numbers of questions on notice a councillor may bring to the chamber.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to work out, what 2.33 was. I'd forgotten, to be quite honest.
I know, it's okay. Here to help.
I'm happy to hear any comments.
You need a seconder first. Seconded by Councillor Mayne. Councillors, any questions or debate? Councillor Mayne.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, it's probably a slightly mischievous comment. I accept that in advance. I heard Councillor Pollock suggest earlier that if it's not broken, why fix it? Well, we just voted to get rid of something that wasn't broken, so the logic doesn't necessarily hold in the thinking. But I'd like to hear from Councillor McGinley, because the question of notice, from my experience over nearly 3 years now, that does seem to have worked. I don't think I've seen an abuse of that. I appreciate Councillor Brown's commentary earlier about this will flow, decisions today will flow into the next council as well, so we have a legacy to be thinking about. I'd just like to hear more as to your thought process here. Thank you.
I'm simply thinking of an example where a member of the public might come to me as a councillor with 3 or 4 or 5 questions against agenda items, and I have to say, well, pick which 2 you want to ask and we'll deal with the others some other time, but then some other time that agenda item has been and gone and dusted perhaps. I just think it's unnecessarily limiting to just have 2 questions. This attitude of, well, the perspective of saying, well, what if in an extreme circumstance this happens, we've got to have a defence. If someone has been mischievous and deliberately abusing the system, we also have a code of conduct against them for lack of fact.
Councillor, can I just ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
Do you believe that prior to any given subject coming into the chamber, that generally speaking, we have had briefing opportunities and we have had opportunities to ask, leading up to it, questions of staff? So I guess my question is that, do you believe that that's not opportunity enough, and that moreover the questions on notice are, in this instance, probably a way for a councillor to get that question on notice on public record? And do you believe that 2 questions on any given subject can't allow you the opportunity to get that out into the public domain? And I'm just concerned, would you consider, rather than 2 or leaving it open-ended, perhaps coming up with a figure that would be acceptable, given that it will need to be potentially multiplied by 9?
So just to clarify something, 2.33 is not 2 questions on any particular subject. It's 2 questions to any meeting. So there could be several items that someone wants to have a councillor ask on notice, and they're limited to 2. In other words, there's 3 agenda items on today's list at least. They might have a question on each of them that they would like to put in the public record, and you'd say, no, pick your 2 most important one and forget the other. It just, I'd be happy to see what I see as a more reasonable number in there, 4, 5, 6. I think Councillor Nathan says, as long as you can put it on one hand, I'd go for 5. Just change 2 to 5.
The General Manager would just like an opportunity to give you some clarification around that.
Through the Mayor, and certainly not to enter into debate, Councillor, you've said twice now that this would be potentially on items on the agenda that you might then lodge a question on notice. Just keep in mind that the question on notice needs to be on the Friday before the agenda is published. So it's actually not possible for a councillor to put a question on notice for something on the agenda because you're not conferred. You do not know whether it's going to be on the agenda. So I'll just bring that point in case there's been any confusion about that. And of course, public forum is for the community and councillors to ask questions on items on the agenda.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Yeah, I got caught up on the agenda thing, but basically any topic at any meeting.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, look, I'm comfortable with 2, and if you have a concern where you think you need more questions, or because a resident has come to you, it seems to be that it's all about a resident asking you to ask a question, you've got colleagues around here, you can send them to them. Sure, you've got colleagues or friends in the room that you could actually ask them to ask the question for you to help you out.
Nice tactic. I'll remember it. Thank you.
Councillor Nathan.
I'm busy with my semantics again, Madam Mayor. I noticed that it's just disappeared on me. The word may appears yet again. That 2.33 says each councillor may put a maximum of 2 questions. Isn't may one of those nebulous words where it could be, well, they may put 2, but they may put 3, 4 or 5? Is it one of those?
No, because it clearly says may put a maximum of 2 questions.
But then they could say, I have question 1, A, B, C, D, question 2, E, F, G, H.
They could do that, or they may just have one question, but they may not put more than 2. It's a maximum. I think it's pretty clear. Councillors, we've been asked for a division. Those for the amendment, I'll put it to the vote. Those for the amendment are Councillor McGinley and those against are myself, Councillor Innes, Councillor Brown, Councillor Mayne, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Nathan, Councillor Tate, Councillor Constable and Councillor Pollock. Your amendment has been lost, Councillor. Yes? Would you like a quick amendment? We don't need a mover and a seconder to do that. Yeah. We're not going to formally do that, Councillor. We're just going to take a moment to allow our Minutes Secretary to catch up with what we've done, and hopefully by that stage Councillor Brown will be back with us. Excuse me, councillors, I'll remind you we're not effectively on a break. So, councillors, we're going to get back to it. And before you at the moment, we do have a proposed amendment that was put forward earlier, but we'll move it and second it in a moment. When you move it, councillor, I'll ask that you read it out.
Okay. That clause 3.7 be amended to read, the General Manager or their delegate may refuse an application to speak at a public forum. The General Manager or their delegate must give reasons in writing by 5 p.m. the business day prior to the meeting for a decision to refuse an application.
You need a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Nathan. Councillors, we're going to speak very slowly, so allowing Councillor Brown time enough to join us again. Councillors, are there any questions or debate? We've been asked for a division. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour? Those in favour are myself, Councillor Innes, Councillor Mayne, Councillor Nathan, Councillor Tate, Councillor Constable and Councillor McGinley. Those against are Councillor Brown, Councillor Thompson and Councillor Pollock. Your amendment has been carried, Councillor. Councillors, in Committee of the Whole, there was discussion, if I draw your attention to 3.3, and I can't remember exactly who was discussing it, but we're going to need a mover and seconder to amend in the second last line where it says, and should state whether they wish to speak for or against an item, that I think it was proposed that it reads may. Councillor, would you like to put forward as an amendment?
Yes, shall I read the whole thing?
I
Okay.
don't think you need to, Councillor. I think if you just read that last sentence.
I think the key thing is and must identify the item of business on the agenda of the council meeting the person wishes to speak to and may state whether they wish to speak for or against the item.
Yes. Can I have a seconder for that amendment? Seconded by Councillor Main. Councillors, any questions or debate? Councillor Brown.
It's more of an observation. I just noticed that we seem to hold other councils in the region up to the highest level because they're televising public forum, yet those same councils require those presenters to actually identify whether they're speaking for or against. So I'm just seeing that we seem to have a bit of a pick and choose to make sure we get the right result here, rather than have some kind of uniformity across the process.
Councillors, I'll put the motion. Those in favour, and I remind you, you've been asked for a division. Those in favour are myself, Councillor Innes, Councillor Main, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Nathan, Councillor Tate, Councillor Constable, Councillor McGinley and Councillor Pollock. Those against, Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown, now's the opportunity for you to make that slight amendment that
it's just on
brought up earlier.
Yeah, it's just at the very beginning, Madam Mayor. Where is it? In regards to 7.1,
Yep.
just refers to when we have the welcome and then acknowledgement of the country. I'd actually like to have the acknowledgement of the country to be as an individual item, as number 2, and everything else is pushed down. That's okay.
Is there a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Main.
The reason being is I think that it warrants its own standalone line item. I understand under the oral, when you get your presentation there, it's listed as number 2, but I think it's important. I'd also like to, just in that welcome to country, whether we can actually ensure that we have a welcome to country that reflects the wishes of the Aboriginal Advisory Committee, which refers to having the Brinjayou and the Walbunji peoples being recognised in the welcome to country. It's currently not, I think, in yours at the moment.
Happy to have that discussion, but I don't think it's relevant to the Code of Meeting Practice, Councillor, but I see your point, and perhaps that's something you could bring either as notice of motion or that we just workshop with the Aboriginal Advisory Committee. I would support that.
I'll speak to Councillor McGinley about that.
Okay, councillors, we have a mover and a seconder for an amendment. Any debate or questions, councillors? Put the matter to the vote, and we've been asked...
No need for a division.
No need for a division.
Not that precious.
Councillors, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour? Carried. So, councillors, we now go back to the motion, the original motion, and there will have to be a slight amendment to reflect the 7 minutes for public access to make it consistent with the 7 minutes of public forum. Sorry, we're just going to allow... Okay, councillors, our minutes secretary has just asked us. We'll make it. Councillors, can I have a mover and seconder just for a 5-minute adjournment to allow our minutes secretary time to include those amendments? I know, I apologise. Moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor McGinley. We will be, all those in favour? We'll be back here in 5 minutes. Thank you, Councillor. So, councillors, we are back to the original motion. It's been moved, it's been seconded, it has been debated, but now is the opportunity for any final questions or debate. Councillor McGinley.
Just to reiterate, I would like a division on this vote as well.
No problem at all. Councillor Nathan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Because what we are debating is of the utmost importance, I would like to read from a carefully prepared memo my deepest thoughts on this matter. I need to preface my observations with several important background pieces. Firstly, in terms of social, political and economic philosophy, I follow the tenets of what is sometimes called libertarianism. I was also born and raised Jewish. These colour my view of the piece of federal legislation commonly known as 18C. For these reasons, you will understand why I will defend to my dying day each person's right to freedom of speech and religion, to praise and insult. However, with these rights come responsibilities, in particular, to do no harm. I will fight to my dying day for each of us to take up the responsibility of speaking the truth. I will be quoting from three wise men, Adam Smith, who wrote The Wealth of Nations, Shakespeare, and Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. I believe that the role of government should be limited and be as close to the community as possible. It is there to provide a safe space where each can develop to their own potential and by this method have the greater good unfold by Adam Smith's invisible hand. I do not believe that it is the responsibility for any of us or the government, be it local, state or federal, to provide a platform for others to speak. There is a vast difference between providing a safe space for freedom of speech in the public interest and providing the platform from which to disseminate it. I do think it is important that the members of the community, ratepayers and residents alike, have a time and space where they can address their elected representatives as a group, over and above formal submissions, letters, emails or telephone conversations. Currently at Eurobodalla, this time and space has been in the form of public access and live-streamed public forum. In this instance, I wish to speak in support of the sad necessity to stop the practice of live streaming of the words of our public. I would, however, remind everyone that the presentations and Council's response to those presentations will still be available on the web. Journalists will not be compromised in their efforts to report professionally and with accuracy. To my regret, in the time that I've lived in the Shire, I have on occasion watched this space being abused. When Council is in a session and being live streamed, councillors and staff are bound by codes of conduct. However, despite the perceptions of some in the gallery, these same codes do not proscribe any visiting speakers in public forum or public access. I'm now of the opinion that because of the rapid changes in technology, live streaming provides a platform rather than a safe space to be heard. I call to mind Shakespeare when he wrote, "And this above all to thine own self be true, and then it will follow as the night the day you cannot be false to any man." I can basically sum up my profoundly held philosophy with the statement that we each need to have respect for our roots, the principles of democracy and the rights and freedoms that we enjoy as a result. This new code of meeting practice does not deny freedom of speech and expression. It will, however, not provide a platform for others to speak on. In the words of Rabbi Salanter, not everything one thinks should be said. Not everything one says should be written. Not everything one writes should be printed. And not everything printed should be read. I commend the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. If there's no further comments or debate, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour? We've been asked for a division. Those in favour are myself, Councillor Innes, Councillor Brown, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Nathan, Councillor Tate, Councillor Constable and Councillor Pollock. Those against are Councillor Mayne and Councillor McGinley. The motion has been carried.